Louie CK has released a statement following the New York Times piece that detailed sexual abuse and misconduct by the comedian. He says, in part, these stories are true. At the time, I said to myself that what I did was okay because I never showed a woman my dick without asking first, which is also true. But what I learned later in life, too late, is that when you have power over another person, asking them to look at your dick isn't a question, it's a predicament for them. The power I had over these women is that they admired me, and I wielded that power irresponsibly. I also took advantage of the fact that I was widely admired in my and their community, which disabled them from sharing their story and brought hardship to them when they tried because people who look up to me didn't want to hear it. I didn't think that I was doing any of that because my position allowed me not to think about it. I deeply regret that this has brought negative attention to my manager, Dave Becky, who only tried to mediate a situation that I caused. I brought anguish and hardship to the people at FX who have given me so much, the Orchard who took a chance on my movie, and every other entity that has bet on me through the years. I've brought pain to my family, my friends, my children, and their mother. The fallout from the piece by the Times and these allegations coming forward is that Netflix has dropped their plans to air a Louie special. Also, in less than 24 hours since the Times broke its story, CK has been cut loose by his film distributor, by HBO, and now by Netflix. FX, the current home of CK, produced Better Things, and the original airing network of Louie issued a statement that said the allegations were, quote, under review, and that the network was troubled by what came to light in the Times. Also, the Orchard has announced that they will not be moving forward with the release of the film I Love You, Daddy. Just a very short statement from them, ending with a thank you. Now, I want to get a response from this panel, but what I want to do first is just to break down a little bit about his statement that he released. We read it just in part, but if you read the full thing, you'll see words there like remorseful, reconcile, regret. A combination of words you won't see is I'm sorry or I apologize. What I think is important to remember is that this acknowledgement is a result not of his own reflection on the situation. It is a result of us now knowing about these allegations that the New York Times have published. This is evidence because in early September, the New York Times asked him directly at a press junket about the allegations, probably knowing full well that they were going to be releasing the story. And when CK was asked about it then, before the Harvey Weinstein piece, before public opinion had swayed, he says, quote, if you actually participate in a rumor, you make it real. When pressed further on that, he said, they're rumors, that's all it is. So obviously just a straight up lie. Now, with that said, I want to toss to you guys. This is obviously incredibly disgusting, and just chime in, guys.
Okay, so
I will say, I was talking to Simone before we went tape. I'm really heated about this.
Yeah, as you should be. That's the correct response.
Okay.
Well, we're gonna have a range of opinions on it, so this could get interesting. Okay, here's what I need clarification on, Grace. To what degree did they have power over these 5 different women?
Okay. So in the late 1990s, there was an anonymous woman who was working on a television show of which he was a producer and a writer. She was working in production. And then in 2002, Dana Goodman, Julia Wallov, they were performers at a US Comedy Arts Festival. They referred to their coming onto this festival as their, quote, big break. CK was a featured performer there. So that means he's top billed. He's not their boss necessarily, but he wields more power in that situation. 2003, Abby Shockner was an up and coming comedian who called Louie, who was at that time a staff writer on Cedric the Entertainer's show, to invite him to a gig. He then responded to that by masturbating over the phone while he was talking to her. And then in 2005, Rebecca Corey was on a pilot. Louie was the guest star on that pilot when he asked her if he could masturbate in front of her.
Okay. So I have a range of opinions on those things, and so, but we're all here, we're all discuss it. So first, one thing I liked was his flat-out admission at this point, which is usually half measures Harvey Weinstein with, if I did anything, fine, I feel bad about that, but I'm now gonna fight the NRA, which is random and a horrible, horrible non-apology. Roger Ailes, Bill O'Reilly, the worst of the worst in terms of not admitting it, etc. He just comes out and says, I did it. So that was a tiny bit refreshing. On the other hand, Grace is absolutely right. He was caught. He never said he did it before he was caught.
He flat out denied it before he was caught.
And he denied it before. And so, unlike Bill Clinton, he didn't go around smearing all of the people that had accused him of it. That's another big difference. But his manager according to some of the charges, tried to dissuade people from coming forward. That's bad. Okay.
And when we say his manager, it is perhaps the most powerful manager in the comedy world, which is incredibly insular, very protective. They protect their own. So it's not just any manager. I know it's sort of like, oh, he has a manager. Dave Becky represents Aziz Ansari, Amy Poehler, and other big names that I'm blanking on. 3 Arts Entertainment is huge in the comedy world to be represented. So it's he was a powerful man represented by an equally, if not more powerful man in Hollywood.
So, but I want to be clear. Because now every one of these new revelations puts in the same sentence as Weinstein and Cosby and all those guys, right? And I don't think that this one belongs in that category. And again, you guys tell me why I'm wrong on this, but it seems like the only one he didn't ask consent of was the one on the phone. Now he asked for consent on all the other ones, which I think is enormously important. Now, did he abuse a position of power? The answer seems to be kind of in some of those situations. So none of these women directly worked for him. Now that's not a complete blanket excuse, okay? He did have more power than them in some of the places where they co-worked, and so that is really relevant. But if you just get into Louie CK is a really powerful guy, and hence by definition, even asking for consent and then making a woman uncomfortable in a situation where there's a misunderstanding or whatever, to me, that's not a crime at all. That's nothing. So when they work together, it's a different and complicated dynamic. So that's my take on it.
He even acknowledged that just him asking for consent to do this in that situation puts women in a compromising position just because he's Louie CK and they are not.
So Simone, I hear you, but let's draw the lines here, and and this is all just our opinions. But if is he so powerful he's not allowed to ask to have any kind of sexual relation with anyone? That's crazy. That can't be the standard. But they work together.
Why did he address it in his statement? Why did he say that I knew that I had power over these women who admired me, and I wielded that power irresponsibly? He himself says that was irresponsible in the way that he did it. I don't disagree that powerful people can have sex with less powerful people, and there can be consent involved. But I mean, there are different situations and context, I think, for each incident. And he said as much. He said that it was irresponsible the way that he went about it.
And also think about time and place for consent. I mean, and I feel weird even using, hey, is it okay if I whip my dick out? And you're a lesser known individual, and then it's Louie CK, who is literally one of the biggest names in I would say in the 21st century, 20th century comedy,
Yeah, that's not
but he was
that's not like an easing into it.
Cenk, he asks Rebecca Corey on set, when they're on set, hey, like, could I masturbate in front of you? The answer is obviously no, and he knows that. He after she said, she's like, hey dude, you have a pregnant wife and also a wife, so no. And he was like, I'm sorry, I have issues. He knows it's wrong. He acknowledges that his behavior is wrong. So he knows that that's not the time or place to ask for consent if you can masturbate when you're in a place of work. It's where they work.
So Grace, I don't want anybody to misunderstand. In that scenario, I totally agree with you. Okay, so in that scenario, he is clearly in a position of power on the same show that they're working on, and he puts her in an awkward, untenable situation, and it's not fair to her. So that's why I'm trying to delineate between the different cases. In another case, he's a staff writer. He's not the legendary Louie CK yet. It is 14 years ago, and in one case, he has a bigger billing on the same comedy show that they're in. Okay, I guess you have a responsibility to be more careful in that situation, but it's not like I definitely control the fate of the universe, and if you don't do this, you'll be in a lot of trouble. It's just it's a different dynamic. So I think it's important to make those distinctions. Otherwise, any infraction gets you put in the same category as Weinstein and Ailes and Cosby, and I don't think that's right either.
So you don't think Louie CK belongs in that category with that pool of men?
Definitely not. No. So in fact, Weinstein and Brett Ratner, very similar fact scenario, right? Except with one enormous enormous difference. Ratner says to Olivia Munn, in the first instance, he doesn't ask her, he doesn't say anything. She works for him on a set that he is the director on. She walks in at the time as an intern or whatever into his trailer, and he immediately masturbates in front of her. No consent asked, clearly the boss, that is 100% guilty, right? So Ailes, they work for him. O'Reilly, they work for him, and O'Reilly non-consensual masturbation. And then Harvey Weinstein asks for sex. She says no in a situation where he has her cornered in a little like remote area of a restaurant, right, where there's nobody else around. She says no, and then he says, then shut up and stand there while he masturbates. Clearly non-consensual position of power. Those are, I mean, if we can't say that that's worse, I'm afraid that we're gonna then make those crimes like, it diminishes those crimes. Those crimes are really, really, really bad.
I hear you. I just feel it. I don't think that we should be qualifying when it comes to sexual misconduct. It feels wrong to say, well, he only did this, because then we're sort of allowing him to perhaps enter into this space. Simone and I were also talking about this before we went to tape. Is how many years until we forgive him and he puts out a Netflix special that's called "I'm Sorry" or "I Messed Up"? You know, and that's something that we look. If you do this at any job, you're fired. He's proven that when given a position of power, he will abuse that. Well, because you were talking about the allegations before. It wasn't so, he was just a staff writer, but then he becomes more powerful and he gets more bold with his actions. So I think that, I understand what you say about you don't want to diminish the other accusations of the other one, but I don't think that we're doing that by just calling out the very bad behavior of Louie CK. I don't think that diminishes the other women who have come forward in the case of like Weinstein and Brett Ratner. Let's treat each case as an individual. Louie CK fucked up. We should be able to call him out for that, and he should be able to say, "I'm sorry" or "I apologize" in your stupid statement.
I'm gonna leave the qualifying or ranking of sexual misconducts and sex crimes up to the victims. But I do wanna talk about the timing of this statement. He has this film that's coming out, "I Love You, Daddy," and he wrote and directed the film and even wrote a character into the film that masturbates or pretends to masturbate in front of people. And so I haven't seen the film, but a lot of people who have seen the film say, wow, this is very familiar behavior. This actually is pretty reminiscent of the rumors that have been going around about Louie CK for years. So he spoke to the New York Times in September and said, these are just, when the New York Times brought up these allegations, he said, those are just rumors, as you read that statement, Grace. And now, a couple months later, he's coming out after the New York Times published this investigation and these reports, and now he's saying, now he's got this long, remorseful apology and this very in-depth statement. Now, honestly, before I set foot in this set, I think I had a more open-minded approach to his his apology, and I wanted to say, wow, if someone is going to come forward and say, yes, I admitted to all of this and what I did was wrong, then we have to acknowledge statements like that so that other abusers feel comfortable coming forward before they are caught. I don't know if Louie CK would have done this if he hadn't been caught. But I question the timing of this, because it seems like he was more willing to profit off of his victims and their stories than he was willing to acknowledge that those stories actually happened. He only did that when he was caught red-handed.
Okay, I think last question. If there was no dynamic where they're working together, let's say it's a fan, and he asks, "Can I masturbate in front of you?" It is deeply uncomfortable, okay, and you could say it's quote unquote wrong, but I mean, is that a problem? Is he then in trouble? Does he have to apologize for that? Because he's way more powerful than the fan.
I mean, it's a good question. I think it comes down to time and place and consent and the dynamic between, if it was a fan that, oh, I really wanted to hook up with Louie CK that night, but that's not what we're hearing from any of these women. None of these women were like, we were kind of hitting it off, we were that's not what was happening. It was, they admired this comedian. He said that he wanted to spend time with them, or she felt so moved that she could even call him up and invite him to a show, to which he starts masturbating over the phone. So I don't think that it's a question that is hypothetical. hypothetical because we don't know. That's not what the accounts that have come forward, because the women that have come forward were women that somehow worked with him, that were in the entertainment space, and especially in the world of comedy, that can be pretty broad. Whether they were working on set, whether they were fellow comedians. So that's the dynamic that we're dealing with the accounts that have come forward.
I think, Cenk, you have to understand what it's like to be a woman alone in a room with a powerful man. And that may be something that you'll never understand. But I think you saw that with Weinstein's accusers. I mean, he asked the same question of them, and a lot of times they felt unsafe. They felt like, if I say no to this man who's bigger than me, who can overpower me, I don't know that I'll be able to get myself out of this situation. So I'm not giving you a yes or no to that answer. I'm just saying that sometimes you got to understand the dynamic.
Look, I understand that, and that's why we have these tough, sometimes awkward and uncomfortable conversations to hear each other's
necessary conversations.
Yes, to hear each other's perspectives. So the perspective of a woman in that tough situation is important for everyone out there to hear. But I'm also telling you that from the perspective of a guy, if you say a guy is just too powerful and he can no longer ask for any sexual act, or if he misreads a situation and there's a miscommunication, then he's guilty because he's more powerful. You're gonna have a revolt in the other direction, and guys are gonna say, no way, then I'm not buying any of this. I'm telling you right now, that's what's gonna happen.
Yeah, I totally hear that. I wonder if there's no easy answer to that question. I think I'm just willing to leave it there.
If you like this video, you probably like independent media. The best way to support independent media, become a member of the Young Turks. TYTnetwork.com/join.